What's up, warriors? I'm Rob, and today I'm going to be showing you how to set up a multi-camera project in Adobe Premiere with externally recorded audio. Now you're probably wondering what that means. Well, what that means is that you've shot some sort of film or video project with more than one camera, and you've recorded a higher quality audio onto some sort of external recorder. So in this picture, you can see I have 3 DSLR cameras, one close-up, or 2 close-up cameras, and 1 wide camera, and an external audio recorder closer to the subjects here. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is folder management. Folder management is managing the project folder where all of the media and files related to your project live. This is important because if you have to come back to this project at a later date to get something, or you have to hand it off to somebody else, they're going to be able to open up the folder and have a clear understanding of where everything is. As you can see here, I've copied the contents of each SD card into its own folder and labeled it accordingly. What I mean by that is that I had 3 cameras running and my audio recorder. If we'd had a long shoot day and I'd used more than one SD card per camera, each of these camera folders would have a card 1, card 2, card 3, etc. folders in it. Since we didn't, I just copied the contents of the SD card. You can see that here with the folder structure and the extra files that I use for Magic Lantern, which is a custom firmware I use while shooting with Canon cameras. The other thing I wanted to show you is that I like to create my Adobe projects in a project file folder. So in this folder I would have my Premiere and After Effects project files here. I recommend that because both of those Adobe project files create a lot of extra folders and extra files in any directory they live in, so it's best to give them their own directory. Once you've created your project folder, it's time to create your Premiere project file. You want to remember to do this in the project file folder. As you can see, I've already done that here, so let's just open that up. And here we have an empty Adobe Premiere Pro project. So I'm going to put that on half the screen, and then I'm going to load the folder, my project folder, up on the other half of the screen. And since I've worked with my DSLR footage before a lot, and I also know that the clips are short, I know that I can just drag each of these folders into the project panel. There'll be a few errors of random files. I use custom firmware with my Canon cameras, so there'll be a lot of extra files just living in these folders, but Adobe Premiere will ignore most of those. And here we go. As you can see, I've imported all of my projects folders into here, and the next thing I want to do is I want to make a timelines folder. That's where we're going to keep all of our sequences. I don't know why I don't call it a sequences folder. I just call it a timelines folder. It's important to make sure that the folder structure in your project somewhat resembles the folder structure in your actual project folder. This is because if you ever have to locate files later or a whole folder of clips gets moved, you really want to be able to locate it and link the media easily. And Adobe's got pretty good at locating assets, but the folder structure has to actually match things. I've worked on other projects where people have pulled clips in here and there and created all these different folders, and then something's gotten moved and it's taken a lot of time to relink everything that should be pretty much automated. First, you created your project folder and you loaded all of your media and assets into that. Then you created your Adobe Premiere Pro project file and you imported all of your assets into that. Now it's time to make a sequence. There are a number of ways to make a sequence in Adobe Premiere. You can click the New Item button and select Sequence. This will open up a window with a ton of different options. Sometimes it can take a little bit of time to navigate to exactly what you want. There is an easier way. If you click and drag one of the clips from one of your cameras onto the New Item button, it will actually create a sequence of the exact same dimensions and frame rate as the clip you dragged. So I did that with camera 1. I'm going to rename that Sync, and I'm going to drag this sequence into my Timelines folder. Since camera 1 is already in this sequence, I'm going to zoom out by pressing the minus button on the keyboard, and then I'm going to drag the other 2 camera angles onto the sequence. And I know that this camera angle is actually the mid, and I thought that that will be the one that we want to look at by default, so I'm just going to put that on the top. You also want to remember to add your externally recorded audio clip to the sequence as well. Once you've added all of your clips to your sequence, I find it's best to go through and change the label color of all the different camera angles. This will help later just to visually differentiate them. So there we go, we've added all of our clips to our sequence. It's time to go about setting things up so that I can synchronize them. Now, Adobe Premiere Pro has a great built-in synchronize option, but sometimes it's unreliable, so I'm going to show you how I do things by hand. First, I'm going to double-click the left side of each track on the audio so that I can see the waveform. Now that we can see all the waveforms, you can actually see that there's a little gap here on all 4 tracks. We just slide that up. There we go. Now I'm going to press the plus key on the keyboard to zoom in. And as you can see, I'm already getting close to lining everything up just by eyeballing things. So I'm going to pause things as I go in even further and synchronize these all perfectly, and then we'll get back to this. So I've finished synchronizing all of the clips by hand. Some tips I have are that if you select a clip and you hold Alt on the keyboard down and press left or right on the arrow pad, it will actually move it 1 frame left or right. That's good for the final fine-tuning of the synchronize. Something else I've done is I've gone and I've muted all of the camera audio. Now I'm going to collapse the waveforms for those clips and just leave my externally recorded audio here. Before I show you how to set up the multi-camera sequence, I'm going to show you a quick tip. First of all, you want to select the razor tool by pressing C on the keyboard. Then you want to hold Shift down on the keyboard. When you do that, you'll see this white line appear wherever you have the cursor. Then you want to select where you're going to cut, and you click. That cuts every track in the sequence, which is super handy and can save you a lot of clicks. The next thing I'm going to show you is you hold Shift down when you press Delete, and it does a ripple delete, which is great for cutting out chunks of a sequence when you're editing. Now that I've selected all of my clips in the sequence, I'm going to select Nest. Then I'm going to name it something like Multi-Camera Sequence. Now that I've nested all of the clips, I'm going to right-click that and turn Multi-Camera on. Now you won't see anything immediately, because what you need to do is you need to add this button to your toolbar, the Toggle Multi-Camera View button. You can do that by selecting the button editor over here on the side, the plus symbol, and you want to drag the Toggle Multi-Camera View down into your toolbar. Once you've done that, you'll be able to click it, and you'll be able to see your other camera angles as you play through the timeline. One tip I have is that if you're not seeing anything here in the multi-camera view, you may not have the appropriate track selected. As you can see here, when I have the second track selected, this window is empty because that's not where the multi-camera clip is. Once I select the appropriate track, it comes back. And there you have it, Warriors. That's how you properly set up a multi-camera sequence in Adobe Premiere. Editing a multi-camera sequence is actually pretty easy once everything's been set up. All you need to do is press play and hit the different numbers on your keyboard that match the camera angles, and it will actually switch through to those cameras and record the changes at that point in the timeline. We'll actually explore multi-camera editing in the next episode of Workflow Warriors. In this episode of Workflow Warriors, we learned how to set up your project folder. Then we learned how to set up your Premiere Pro project file. And finally, we learned how to set up a multi-camera sequence. Thanks for joining us, and I'll see you next time on Workflow Warriors.